Hello and welcome again to Guzzoline Garage. Today we're looking at my Audi A6. It's due its MOT and it needs a bit of TLC. Just completed a service on it, that should be the previous video. And in this video we'll be fitting discs and pads to the front of the car because the warning lights come on the dashboard and it won't get through the MOT with that on. We're also going to change the calipers as well because I did have a little look when I was shopping for parts and looks like the calipers have started to seize up a little bit because the pads have worn quite unevenly. So we'll chuck some new calipers on. I was also getting a slightly strange rotational noise, a bit like a wheel bearing, but I don't think it was a wheel bearing. And I've also got a track rod end to fit, which was highlighted at the last MOT, but I better get it done now. There's an alarming amount of play in this wheel. So here's the brake discs. Some nice C-hook items from M-Tech Brakes. Here's the brake pads, some EBC yellow stuff with the built-in wear sensor. Here's a caliper, and there's another one over there somewhere. These are from Autodoc, very good price on them. And this is a fag. Stop laughing in the back. Now this is the track rod end, which looks like so. Of course, working on the front of the car, first thing we need to do is jack it up and put it on axle stands, which very handily I've already done as part of the servicing. If you don't know how to do that, just have a quick look at the last video and you'll see the good points to jack it up from and where to put your axle stands. Annoyingly, the wheels on modern VW Audi stuff are fitted with these pointless plastic caps. There's a special tool in the boot of the car, along with the emergency kit, the jack and all the rest of it, that helps you pull those caps off. And there's a special round one that fits over the locking wheel nut. Like that. A little bit different to all the others. And you need your locking wheel nut socket and take the wheel off the car. If you have jacked it up already, then you're going to need an impact gun to break it loose. Alternatively, leave it on the floor, then break it loose before you jack it up, because they're quite tight. Don't use chrome sockets on an impact, it's very, very naughty. So looking at the pads then, you can see that there's a bit of material still left on the inside of this one. And on the front pad, there's quite a lot of material still left. But the dashboard warning light has still illuminated, and I think that's probably on the other side of the car where it's gotten real low. So that's what makes me think the calipers are starting to seize up a little bit. These pads and discs are not really that old, probably only about 4 years or 25,000 miles old, something like that. And they're quite expensive because these are the yellow stuff pads as well. One of the first things I'm going to look at doing is putting a screwdriver in this gap to create a bit of space, push the pads backwards and free them off the disc so that I can remove the caliper without it catching on the disc, pull the disc off, put a new disc on. To do that, I'm just going to take the lid off of the brake master cylinder, and that will allow the air to come up and out and give me some room to push back on the pistons. So let's go do that. So like I say, I'm just going to put a screwdriver in the gap here and try and lever the pad backwards. By using the disc and the screwdriver as a lever, made quite a lot of space for the pad to move backwards, and the caliper should come fairly easily off the disc. I don't recommend doing that if you, for whatever reason, might need to reuse the pad, or you might have to drive it somewhere to go and get some bits or something like that, because obviously the screwdriver does ruin the pad surface. But I know for a fact that I've got all the bits and I'm not going to need anything. So now for the next step, I'm going to take the entire caliper off from the disc with the bracket assembly as well to enable us to change the disc. But you can kind of think of the caliper as being two discrete parts. So there's the outer area here with the hydraulics and the piston involved, and that is what I would call the caliper. And then this piece here, which also runs down here, as being the caliper bracket. So there's two sets of mounting bolts involved. And so looking behind the caliper, that's what I'm going to try and show you here. So somewhere here, there's a mounting bolt for the caliper bracket, and one at the bottom of the frame as well. Just here, this one. So those two large hex heads are what we're going to remove. To take the entire caliper and bracket assembly off. And then underneath this dust cover here, and there is a matching dust cover in the darkness, sadly, under here somewhere, are the slide pins which will separate the caliper and the bracket assembly, but we'll go over that a little bit later. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to undo the little black plastic caps that are covering what we call the slide pins, and under there should be some bolts which will enable us to separate the caliper and the bracket. And once the little black plastic covers are removed from the ends of the slide pins, you need a 7mm Allen socket to get them out. It's important that you make sure you've got one of those because it's not a dead common size. Quite often socket sets and things will skip that. But it's one of the unique little foibles of Volkswagen Audi Group brakes. They shouldn't be outrageously tight. So then that separates your hydraulic caliper from the caliper bracket via those little bolts there, which are basically the slide pins. At this point, I'll get a rubber bungee and I'll strap this up and just hang it up out of the way while we concentrate on the bracket. So I just put a bungee through there and I've hung it up on top of the suspension arm, and all that does is it saves the electrics and the hose getting dragged around while I'm playing around with the disc and the bracket. Then, with a bit of space behind, we should be able to get to the 21mm hex heads which hold the bracket onto the hub assembly. So that's those big chunky things. They are normally very, very tight, so you may have to put a breaker bar on and hit it with a hammer to break off the torque on that. That was some effort. Now these should never really be greased, oiled or copper greased or anything like that. They should have some Loctite on because they're very important. They're one of the only things holding your brakes on. But that was hellishly tight. And so, just like that, it's apart. But we've got a bit of cleaning up to do, I think. And also, we need to change this caliper still. So I'm going to refit the disc, the new one, just as though we were doing a normal disc and pad change. Then I'm going to refit the caliper bracket, and then we'll look at taking the pads out / changing that caliper. Yet again, I broke my microphone somehow, so all I'm going to do here is give the hub surface a little wire brush. Any rust, dirt or bits and bobs stuck to the hub surface will cause the disc to seat unevenly, and then you could get vibration through the brake pedal and run out on the brake disc. So yeah, just clean it up, and we'll probably put a bit of copper grease on as well, and that will stop any run out on the brake disc when we seat it. You can see there in the hub as well, there's a little snapped off screw. That's just like a little mounting screw that holds the disc in place. It's not essential. They quite often rust, seize up or get chewed up, so it's not really an issue if your car hasn't got one, or if you have got one, obviously you'll need to remove that before you can even remove the disc. Looking at the discs themselves then, these are just some C-hook discs from M-Tech, and you can see that the C-hooks are actually directional to the left and right hand sides of the car. You should always have the sort of curved face entering the pad first rather than the pointy ends of the hooks going into the pad first. It just means it's a bit smoother when you press the pedal down, and it's less wear and tear on the pads. So on these brakes, the only thing that's really directional is the C-hooks. If you look at the vanes in the centre of the disc as well, sometimes those are directional, sometimes those spiral in or spiral outwards. These are straight vanes, so the only thing that makes the discs left and right is the C-hooks. They also come with a protective oil coating on, so we'll just need to use some brake cleaner or some solvent to get rid of that protective oil. And that's just from manufacturer, and it stops them from rusting while they're in storage. So like I said, I'm going to copper grease the hub and then put the disc on. And then, having cleaned up the caliper bracket and the bolts for it, we're going to refit that. We're going to refit the bolts with a dab of Loctite, and it's a very high torque setting on these. They go all the way up to 190 Newton meters. Part of what makes them so difficult to remove is obviously the fact that they're a steel bolt and they go through the aluminium upright for the strut or the hub. So they seize in place with corrosion, plus they're Loctited, plus they're torqued to 190 Newton meters to begin with. So it's a recipe for corrosion, and you don't have a lot of room to manoeuvre in the wheel arch, so you can't get much leverage on them either. So now that the bracket is back on and torqued, this is basically going to turn into a simple caliper and pad change. So the first thing I'm going to use is a spreading tool. It's a cheap Chinese tool, it's not very strong, but they're quite clever. It's like an expanding ratchet design, so we slot that in there, and then the handle will spread the pads apart. What this does for me is it recovers as much brake fluid as possible, and doesn't make as much mess when we remove it basically. So I'm going to spread the pads with this tool and push the piston back in. Then with those spread, you can think of the caliper as having two sort of connections, the hydraulic fluid and the electrical one for the pad wear sensor. So I'm just going to slot it back on the hub to make it easier to access the back and keep it held steady for me. And then I'm going to look at taking the electrical connection off the back. So it's like all very standard VW Audi type connections. There's a little tab to depress which releases a locking sort of clip on it, and then you can pull the wiring free. The plug is held in this little metal fork, so when it's unplugged you can then turn it through 90 degrees to release it from that metal fork, and then the pad will come loose. Looking at the hydraulics then, there's a little union down here. I can't remember off the top of my head whether that was 10 or 11 mil. I think it was 11 mil. Now it's really common for these to seize up, especially on a car that's sort of in daily use and sees road salt over the winter and so on. The factory brake pipes are only steel, which like to corrode. So when we go to unscrew this union, it's pretty likely that the brake pipe itself will snap, and then we may well have to make a new one, and then it bends around the caliper and joins onto the rubber flexible brake hose. So as I say, we're going to undo the hydraulic union, which is here, where the pipe goes into the caliper. These can be a bit tight and a bit seized. It's a bit rubbish to film because it's round the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blast it with a bit of brake clean to get rid of the dust. Then I'm going to put some penetrating oil on it so that hopefully it won't bind to the caliper, or to the pipe rather. And then before we start trying to turn it, I'm just going to put this hose clamp on, which will minimise the fluid loss. And while you're at it, you can also take out these slide pin bolts, because we don't want those with the old caliper. We're going to reuse those. And then to take the brake pipe nut off, I'm going to use a special brake pipe spanner. You can see it's almost a full circle, but it's got that slit in it to get over the pipe. The size is 11mm. It can be a good idea to work these backwards and forwards a little bit. This one feels like it's going to bind on the pipe, which is a bit of a pain. You will of course lose a bit of brake fluid. And unfortunately this pipe has just snapped, so we're going to have to remake a new little section of brake pipe to join the caliper and flexi hose together. The brake pipe and the hose are fixed onto the back of the caliper with a little 13mm, so we're just going to remove that. Then that bracket drops out of the way, and we're able to remove the caliper. So you can see what's happened on the back here. This pipe has sheared. It's not uncommon, that happens quite frequently. So all we're going to have to do is try and get that fitting out of the caliper and then remake a very short loop of brake pipe. So what I've got left, you can probably see, is this little section of brake pipe. That's the bit that I need to copy and replicate. So I'm going to give it a blast, try and clean it off. And I'm going to give it some penetrating oil as well. And then we'll have to try and unscrew this union. I'm not sure if that's a 10 or 11mm. So you can see how we've got to get that out. You can hook a spanner over this end to hold the bracket secure, and then you can use your 11mm to unscrew the brake pipe. As you can see, this one's all tight and bound up on itself as well. Must remember to put that clip back on at the end. So we've got a coil of brake pipe. It's only a very small offcut, but that's all we need. We've got a couple of male brake unions. I've checked that these will screw into the hose and the caliper because there are metric, there are imperial, there are various different thread sizes available, and those are the correct ones that we need. And in here I've got a brake pipe making kit. This is a relatively fancy one. It's a copy of the Sykes Pick-A-Vant tool. It's a bit cheaper and a bit more Chinese. Basically you mount this in a vise like that. You cut your brake pipe to the length that you need, you put the fittings on, then you clamp this in, which will hold the pipe, and you use one of these blocks which has got various different forming parts in, which then press into the pipe and form the end of it. So let's have a look at getting that set up. A tip for uncoiling your brake pipe, if you want it nice and straight, is to hold one end and then roll it along the workbench like that, and it gives you a nice straight section of line to work with. Obviously this is the line I'm trying to replicate, and I've lost a little bit of it there as well. So I'm going to use this fabric tape measure to try and get a rough estimate of how much line length I need. So that's about 195mm, plus the little bit that I lost on the other end of it. I'd say that's about 30mm. That's what, 225. Maths is not my strong point. So I'm going to say 250 to allow for a little bit of excess and a little bit of deformation when you form the ends of it. So 250mm is the length that I'm going to cut. I always like to cut slightly more brake pipe than I need, because you can always make it a little bit shorter. You can't necessarily make it a bit longer once it's been cut. 250 is all the way down here. Plus some of the bends that they do on the factory pieces are very difficult to replicate when you're making one DIY. So you might need a bit of extra length to make the bends a bit larger. So I've put a little mark on it here. This is a little pipe cutter. Really simple bit of kit. Opens up like that. Pop it into the rollers, align the grooves in the rollers with your mark. Then you don't need to crank this massively, just nip it, spin it around gently until it becomes loose, nip it again, spin it until it becomes loose, nip it, spin it, rinse and repeat. And just like that, you get a real nice cut. Then you pick up the piece that you dropped. And in an ideal world, you might have to deburr this, but I haven't really got a deburring tool that goes small enough, so that's just how that's going to be. This is quite an important part. Put the fittings on and put them the right way round. Because once you form the ends, the fittings can't go on. So always put the fittings on first, then when you deform the ends, you're going to be able to actually use the pipe. So we've got our pipe with our fittings, we're now going to need to select the right blocks. So if we look here, we've got SAE, and then this says 4.75mm or 3/16. This says DIN 4.75, this says SAE quarter. So brake pipe on cars is normally 4.75 or 3/16, depends if it's a classic British Imperial kind of car, maybe American stuff uses this as well. But we tend to use 4.75mm nowadays, and DIN is what the metric fittings should be flared as, so that's the right set of blocks. And then these are the blocks that form the flares. So if you look here, there's two different shapes of flare on that one, and on this one there's only one. So this is for your classic cars. This is the old school way of flaring. Mostly British classic cars is what I use this for the 3/16 or 475, and you can do what you call a male flare or a female flare, single or double flare basically. You must do this one first, then you can optionally do this one second to make a different profile. You sort of fold it one way and fold it back on itself. The modern metric way of doing it is a single operation. So this flare block slides onto this rail, and you can adjust it as you need to. This bit opens. Just unscrew this T-bar first. These blocks go in like so. And you can see that that's open inside. Its mate is a mirror image. So what you're supposed to do is pop your pipe in like that. Bear with me. And pop the other block over the top, and then that will clamp your pipe. But there's a certain way of getting it aligned. So this is all loose at the moment. These metal blocks can't go any further back because they're held by these big black bolts as backstops. The pipe actually needs to come perfectly flush with the blocks. So I just put a light bit of tension on this clamp, only the lightest bit, just to start holding everything in place. Then I just get a little metal engineer's rule and slide it in this gap to hold it flush to the blocks. Like so. Then you can tighten it all down nicely. And that's your pipe clamped then, and the line's not going to move while it gets formed. Adjust this block so it sits right in the middle. Then I'm just going to screw this handle into here. And then the flare is formed in a smooth, continuous motion ideally. It's been a while since I've done this, so let's find out if I've still got the neck. You can see as you move that, it's going to come closer and start to form the flare. I'll try and get you a slightly better camera angle on that if I can. So then by pulling that, the little nipple should seat in the line, and then you get a bit of resistance on the handle, pull it round in one smooth motion, and it cams over like that, indicating you're finished. Then what you're left with once you've separated it all is a formed metal flare. It's not perfect, it's not the best I've ever done, but that's good enough. Rinse and repeat for the other side then. Then what we're left with at the end is a straight bit of brake pipe with fittings on either end that we can use, and that's the bit that actually seals the hydraulics, if you like. So now I just need to try and bend it to shape, but if you just go for a hand bend, you're very likely to kink the pipe and potentially even split it. What we instead use to bend the brake pipe is a pair of these, which are brake pipe bending pliers. They take a little bit of knack to use. So I can see that this is my old pipe. This is where it went into the hose. It come backwards and snaked back round on itself to go into the caliper. So I know that I need a 90 degree straight off the hose to come downwards. So let's try and replicate that first. So the 90 bend is going to go straight after this fitting here. So first of all, hook it under that bar. And get yourself to that position. So this finger on the top is going to hold that brake pipe steady, if you like. And we're lined up on the middle set of grooves because that's the right size for this diameter of pipe. Then you can see on the top half of the plier there's a groove here which should mate with this groove for 45 degrees and this groove for 90. So again, we're going to try and do it in one smooth slow motion. And that's a 90 degree bend in the pipe. So far, so good. Now, it's quite a bit deeper than it ought to be, but we're going to struggle to get around that any other way. This pipe is somewhat flexible and you can get away with fine tuning it while it's on the car. Next, what we want is a bend that starts or has its midpoint around here. So I'm going to put my thumb there as a marker. And then we want it to bend back on itself again. So same sort of process, in to the middle groove and lined up. Then there was a slight directional change, so I've got it set off slightly. And we'll go for it to 45. Can always bend it more if we need to. It's a bit more difficult to bend it back. And you can see immediately that I've bent it in the wrong direction because I'm a muppet. Here's one that I've bent to the correct direction. So we're getting somewhere. We've got a 90 degree, we've got a small straight run, and then we're going to try and get this flicked back up on itself and into the caliper. Now this copper pipe is pretty forgiving. It's not quite pure copper, it's some sort of alloy. You can generally manipulate it with your fingers, but like I say, it's very easy to kink the pipe. So if you're going to do this, be very, very careful. It might be easier as well to put something like a socket in the vise and to bend it around the socket to give it a continuous smooth profile rather than folding the pipe. So all I did was put a deep socket upwards in the vise and it allowed me to try and make this bend around it. It's similar to the old pipe that we took off. Like I say, this copper is relatively forgiving and can be manipulated a little bit by hand. So we're going to do that. So we're back at the car and we've got our brand new caliper. I've just removed the little plug that was in there and I'm just going to very loosely thread in our new brake pipe. Just loosely so that it can still spin around as it needs to. Now I believe the correct orientation is that the pipe comes up this way and snakes back around the inside of the caliper to then go into the hose. So that's what I'm going to try and very loosely just fit together now and get the alignment correct. Don't forget this little clip. Okay,
So we've fitted the brake pipe and we fitted it back to its little metal bracket on the back of the caliper as well. Try and get you a view of where we're at. So you can hopefully see we've got the new union in the bottom of the caliper. The metal bracketry is attached to the back of the caliper here on the 13mm, and the other end of the new pipe is up here. And looking from the top you can sort of see where it snakes down. There's a little bit more alignment work to do, but that's the basic brake pipe made and fitted and the new caliper in place. So I should now be able to release the hose clamp. And that should hopefully minimise any damage to that rubber hose. Next, we're going to make it a little bit more permanent by fitting the new pads. Just going to dollop some copper grease around the edges of the ears on the pad. That's here and here where they slot into the bracket, and just on a little smear on this back plate or shim, because that will stop the pad from rattling in its holder. So again, just a smear around this back plate, which is quite a lot actually. I probably put a bit too much on there, and around the ears here. The outer one is the one without the electrical connection. That just clicks into place like that. And we'll just grease up the piston side one. Same again, so that clicks into the piston, so I'm going to just do a little ring around where the piston's going to sit, again to stop rattle and squeal, and at the ears where it locates into the bracket. So that's your new pads in place. Next up is to reuse the old slide pins with a little dab of Loctite, and these are going to get torqued to 30 Newton meters. So they go into the little rubber boot bits on the back. And put your little rubber boots over the top. So now there's the pad wiring to look at. So the wear sensor needs to come up from the back of the pad, and then it gets held in place in there like so. Turn it through 90 degrees to lock it in place and click the connector on. Then there's the retaining clip to refit as well, which hooks in behind the bracket and is a bit difficult to get fitted. Keep your fingers out of the way because there's quite a lot of tension on it. And that's refitted. Then what we need to do is just press the pedal a few times to settle the caliper. We'll need to bleed it obviously as well, but also it's worth just having a quick once over now that we're done to check all of your connections. Check you've clipped the pad in, check that the hose connection's tight, check that the bottom caliper connection's tight, and that the bleed nipple's accessible and good, and that you've done the slide pins and everything else. So here we are on the other side of the car, and we're going to do exactly the same, take the wheel off and change the caliper, but I've also got a second job to do. I've got this play here in the steering assembly. It's quite a large amount of it really. It was picked up last year on the MOT. There's nothing top to bottom, it's only left and right, and it's being caused by this joint here. If I wobble the wheel, hopefully you'll be able to see it. There are a couple of other culprits on the car. There's two joints at the top here as well, but if we have a little focus on them, you can see that they appear to just be moving as normal. So it's definitely this track rod end that's the culprit. So let's get the wheel off and get to having a look at this. So with the wheel off and looking at the track rod, there's a couple of things that secure it. There's a pinch bolt through the side here. There's a bolt that goes in the top of the track rod end here. And there's a lock nut on the actual tie rod or the end of the steering rack. Sometimes these threaded rods here are left and right hand thread for different sides of the vehicle. On this particular Audi, they're both the same thread. So you need to be careful which rod you're getting for which side sometimes. So we're going to try and take out the bolt from the top and the pinch bolt, and we're going to try and slacken off this lock nut. I'll go with the lock nut on here first because that's probably one of the most seized, and if I get all this freed off by some miracle, that will be difficult. So let's go with this end first. So now we've got a 21mm to hold the locking nut and try and loosen it, and we've got an 18mm which fits just behind it onto the steering rack end, or inner tie rod if you prefer. And then hopefully you'll be able to get some movement on that inner lock nut and just loosen it off slightly. That's enough, you don't need to go all the way, and it's actually quite handy if you can just loosen the tension on it but leave it where it is. Now you see I've sprayed quite a lot of penetrating oil on this because it's not uncommon for these pinch bolts to seize up a little bit. I'm going to try and take the top fastening out first. This is a 13mm by the way. So with the 13mm top bolt out and the lock nut loosened, next is obviously this pinch bolt, which is a 16mm. Pretty common for these pinch bolts to seize in place because it's an aluminium upright or knuckle hub, whatever you want to call it, and a steel bolt. You get the galvanic corrosion in the gap here, and they can be a bit of a nightmare to get out, so we might have to use a bit of heat, and we'll just keep having a go. So now that the pinch bolt is out of this hole and the mounting bolt is out of the top, the track rod more or less should just wiggle free, like that. And then it's still really hot at the moment, so I'm going to give it a few minutes to cool down, but then we need to unwind it from this part. So I'm probably going to use mole grips or Stilson wrench on the track rod end and just hold the inner tie rod still with the 18mm again. So it's not as tight as I thought it would be, to be fair. So I'm just going to stick the 18mm in to hold the steering rack steady, and then there's a trick to doing these. Different ball joints, different manufacturers kind of make them in different sizes, so you can't always rely on this method, but this is what alters how your car steers and how it tracks. So if you fit it incorrectly, then your alignment will be out. You'll probably need to get an alignment done anyway afterwards, but this is a good trick to get you in the ballpark. Count how many turns it takes to come off. 1, 21 and a half, I'd call that. Then when they're out, compare your new versus your old, and you can see that this one is slightly different. The way it's formed, the centre of the ball joint looks similar, but it looks like it's actually got more thread on this one. It's got a shorter plane shaft here, if you can see that. This new one from FAG, which I think is Febi Automotive Group and not FAG, comes with all the new hardware. Now, they can seize in place, so I'm going to copper grease the hell out of this thread to make it easy to adjust in future, and hopefully a bit easier to remove as well. And the same for all these bits and the pinch bolt, etc. It's all going to get copper greased to death. So with some copper grease on the end of the thread, we're going to try and put it in 21 and a half turns, just like how it came out. .21. Then I'm going to thread the lock nut right up to the top. But there is one issue with this new part, and that is that the pinch bolt side of things is not on the correct side at the moment. Now, as you can see, it's a nice smooth clean shaft here, so I'm loath to put any sort of grips on it to try and turn it. So to get the pinch bolt on the correct side, I've got a 10mm hex key here, and there's a female recess here for it. So I should be able to just pop this in and turn the ball joint round. With that roughly in the right place, it's time for a little bit more copper grease. Then we're going to try and slide the pinch bolt in and lather that in copper grease as well. Just be sure that the pinch bolt is lined up correctly on the rear. It's got that sort of D shape on it that needs to fit in properly. And don't forget your top bolt, 13mm. So now we just need to make sure everything's tight and torque it all up. So after a quick Google, it's telling me that it should be 7 Newton meters on the top there, which hardly seems worth bothering. And we should be 45 Newton meters on this one, and it wants you to use a torque wrench on the lock nut at 40 Newton meters, but not many people have those open-ended sockets needed for that, so I guess 3 white knuckles and a grunt would be okay. That's your 45 Newton meters. That's already tighter than 7, I know that. And then you're meant to torque this up to 40 Newton meters if possible. And if not, just do it real tight. There you go, track rod end changed. So with the track rod up there done and out of the way with, the rest of the video is going to be concentrating on the rest of these brakes. I've obviously done one side, so I'll just do a quick time montage of doing this side. And then we'll look at bleeding them pretty much right at the end of the video, and then that'll be the work done. Okay, so surprise, surprise, I've messed up the microphone again. We're going to try and have a look at bleeding the brakes, but I'm obviously doing a voiceover, so this will be a bit rough and ready. This nipple that I'm pointing to on the back is the bleeding point for the brakes. The reason we need to bleed them is obviously because we've got a lot of air in from unscrewing the lines and fitting brand new calipers. This bottle is designed to be a one-person brake bleeding kit. In the end of that tube is like a little ball bearing that should act as an NRV, like a non-return valve, and stop any air coming back up the tube. So in theory all you do is put that tube on the bleed nipple, press the pedal a few times, and hey presto, all the air gets ejected and fluid comes through, and then you just close the bleed nipple again. But in my experience they tend to fall off a lot, and they're just a bit fiddly, and they're not as good as doing like a proper traditional old school manual bleeding. So I'm going to get my glamorous assistant again, and what she's going to do for me is she's going to operate the brake pedal. So this had been loads better with sound, but unfortunately we ain't got none. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the bleed nipple like this. I'm going to say down, at which point she's going to press the pedal down. Then I'm going to close the bleed nipple, and then I'm going to say up, at which point she's going to take her foot off the brake pedal and bring it up if you like. Then we're going to repeat that process a few times. So I say down, she says down and pushes the pedal down. I close the valve, I say up, she says up, confirms it's up. Keep an eye on the reservoir level as you do that, because you will use a reasonable amount of brake fluid as you fill up the new caliper and get all the air out of the brake pipe. It's something of a good idea to pump the pedal a few times before you do the job. That will help settle the pads on the caliper and draw fluid down into the cylinders and what have you, and compress the little bit of air that's in there, which should help get it out as well. So yeah, just give the pedal a few pumps and then you'll be ready to bleed. So I go down, the pedal gets pushed, fluid comes through the hose, I close the valve, I say up, confirm it's up, down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up, and then see that we've got a bit of fluid there come through into the jug. Same again on the other side. You'll probably have to do it a little bit longer than what I've shown it on the video, and keep an eye on that master cylinder level. It's quite easy to accidentally use it all up, and then you start drawing air in from the top, which is no good. Same again, down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up. I'll say it again because it's super important. We'll check the master cylinder level now, and you may need to repeat this procedure a couple of times. I always find it helps as well to have the car windows open so that you can communicate clearly. Just helps you shout out between each other while you're doing it. So unfortunately there on the last clip my microphone wasn't turned on, so you missed out on how to do the brake bleeding. I will try and voice over it a little bit. Hopefully that'll work out. But that's it. Once you've bled the brakes up, you can put the wheels on, take it off the axle stands, make sure you torque the wheels up, and then take it for a careful test drive, making sure that all your work's okay. It's worth going and double checking everything like I always do, especially any fluid connections that you've made, because any small leak could get worse, and you definitely don't want any leaks on your brakes. Thanks very much for watching. If it's been useful, please do like it and subscribe. Leave any comments if you've got any questions or different ways you do things. I'm always keen to learn new methods and ideas. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.